All right, so before we get started with the lecture, I just wanted to introduce the new concept that we're doing. I will be recording as many lectures as possible, and you will be doing your lecture time at home and your homework time in class. It's called the flipped classroom, just designed to allow us to get a little more time working with the material in class where I can help you, and you can take notes and listen to the lecture as many times as you want from this recording. So lecture is the same. Anything underlined, you still need to record in your notes, and make sure you're following along. If I'm going too fast, you can pause. If you need to stop and go back, feel free to watch it again. It's the same thing as a normal lecture. It's just now you get to do it at home. Before we start the lecture, I wanted to make sure that you guys come away with a couple of concepts during the lecture. So I want you to know the main new resources that are created during the Gilded Age, and then the new building materials that are used as well during the Gilded Age. And also, when you come to class tomorrow, you're going to have a little activity to make sure that you were paying attention during the lecture. And I also would like it if you would write down 2 questions that you may have during the lecture time. So if you need to have the questions answered tomorrow in class, I'll give you guys about 5 minutes to ask questions, and we can make sure that any questions are cleared up at the beginning of class. All right, so we're going to start the unit. The unit's called the Gilded Age. Gilded is another word for gold-plated. It was actually coined by Mark Twain, so it's kind of a little fun fact there. The time period 1865 to 1901, so 1865 is immediately following Reconstruction, and we're kind of transforming our society. You can see the subtitle as The Birth of Modern America. We have our Industrial Revolution period, and there's a time of great racial discrimination, and the United States trying to find a way to come out of some of the problems that they had with race following the Civil War. Okay, so we're going to get started with a couple of new things. So defining the times. Basically, we want to know that this is a time that our country transforms more than any other time in our history. We move from rural areas to the cities. Industry booms. The United States booms in general. We become an economic powerhouse. We expand to the borders. We get all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. We start to populate the cities, and they become very useful for us in creating our society and to what we know of it as today. So we close the Western frontier, as I said. We're still expanding. In this time period, 35 years, we settle the majority of the rest of the United States. That's the continental. We still don't have Hawaii. We still don't have Alaska. That's about 430 million acres are settled. Okay, and that's way more than we had obviously settled in the previous 250 years. So the first thing, how do we settle this land? So we're settling this land using the transportation revolution, and the biggest portion of the transportation revolution is the steam engine. And the steam engine allows trains to go much faster, and we are able to connect East Coast to West Coast through the Transcontinental Railroad. Okay, so we link our nation, and it basically becomes a time machine. Okay, we're no longer having to take covered wagons across the country. Now we're able to get on a train and make a week's journey, get from the East Coast all the way to California. So it really shortens time. If you need to get to the West Coast, you're able to do that, and you don't have to go transcontinental. You can go all up and down the East Coast, get to the Midwest, to go to Chicago. It's now obtainable to get anywhere you want to go. Transportation is increased, but also shipping. You can now manufacture goods in the Midwest and get them to California and get them to the East Coast. So now you have a worldwide or a nationwide system of transporting goods. So it's going to open up trade to levels that we've never seen before. Okay, a couple of things that helped out with the transportation revolution. Number one, George Westinghouse's air braking system. Previously, we had to brake trains by pulling really hard on a brake, and hopefully the train will stop. The air braking system is kind of like what we have in our cars now, with like anti-lock auto brakes, where it's really easy to push the pedal and stop your car. Same sort of thing. It makes it easier to stop a train. So if we're going downhill, we're no longer at risk of flying off the tracks because we get out of control. Okay, or less likely. Obviously, they weren't 100% effective all the time. Second thing is George Pullman developing sleeping cars. Sleeping cars were luxury transportation at the time. So if you needed to go to California, it's comfortable. You can sleep. You don't have to sit on a hard wooden bench. Makes it much more obtainable and much easier to do. This is an example of what the sleeping car looked like. Obviously, you can't tell much from the inside, but a nice car. Windows, you can see out. There's ventilation up top, so it makes it a lot more comfortable, is basically the gist of it. Okay, new building materials, you definitely need to know these. These are what I was talking about at the beginning of the lecture. Okay, previously, we used brick, wood, and even on the plains using moss and other weak materials. We now have the advent of concrete, steel, and glass. Okay, and this is going to lead to the transformation of cities, allowing us to build bigger buildings. Okay, we have our first skyscrapers during this time period. Buildings going up to 10 stories tall. And imagine, you're going from little wooden log cabins or wooden shacks, or maybe like a 2-story brick building, and now you got 10 stories high. It's a huge change. It allows for us to start moving into the cities, building apartment complexes, which we'll talk about later. But cities begin to boom because we're able to use these materials to make our buildings bigger. New energy sources, where we have oil, electricity, and coal. It's the new face of industry. We no longer have to locate our power plants and our factories near rivers. We can use these fuel sources to power the factories. So we don't need to use a water wheel to turn a wheel, which provides the power for a whole factory. We can use oil and electricity and coal even to fuel factories in the cities. So now it allows us to concentrate a lot of our industry in the cities. People can live in the cities. It's cheap to live there because of apartments, and it just transforms the way that our society is run. Here's an example of a power plant. You can see it's near a river, but it now has a smokestack, and the smokestack is obviously how you would get rid of the carbon dioxide from the fuel that's being used inside the factory. All right, a few inventions, and I'll show you some pictures and explain them a little bit on the next page. The first one is the Bessemer process, created by Henry Bessemer, and it's moved from using weak iron to strong steel. So basically what you're doing is you're infusing the elements into iron, and by blowing these elements into the iron, it makes steel, and obviously we know steel is super strong. So this allows us to build these skyscrapers extra high and make them sturdy. Thomas Edison invents the first electric generating system, along with the light bulb, record player, tons and tons of things. Obviously one of the greatest inventors in our history. And then George Westinghouse develops the alternating current system. He invents a lot of different things. Him and Thomas Edison are rivals, and I'll talk about that in a second. But he's basically creating alternating current, and it's the electricity that we still use today. It travels long distances. It's a pretty cool new invention because it allows us to transport electricity over long distances as opposed to just really short distances. It alternates the current back and forth 60 times per second, which allows it to maintain its power through the power lines. If we use direct current, which Thomas Edison invented, the power fades as it goes. Okay, so here's a couple pictures. The first picture on the top left is the Bessemer process. I hope that you've seen this before. If you watch like Pittsburgh Steelers football games, you'll see they'll always go to the steel factories and they'll see this. This is when they're blowing the air through the iron, and this is adding elements to strengthen the iron and turning it into steel. Okay, the top right is the electric generating system, just showing the complex nature of the machine and how we're actually fueling or helping energy get through, and we're fueling our society with this new energy. Okay, the alternating system of electricity on the bottom is just kind of like the generator, how it looks. I have a picture of the electric chair next to it because the electric chair was invented by Thomas Edison to show the danger of alternating current. Okay, these are called the current wars because Edison had direct current, and Westinghouse had invented the alternating current, and he wanted to show the danger of alternating current to try to get a contract with the city of New York to use his type of electricity because he could make a lot of money off of this. So he was very successful. Obviously, we know electric chair can kill, but they made it safe, and obviously now we use it. They've lowered the voltage down to 120 volts, so the wall voltage is not really enough to kill an adult. So they did a pretty good job of making it safe. Here's another picture of Thomas Edison inventing the light bulb. Okay, and then new communication. This obviously is like another time machine. You're taking away the idea of having to mail letters, and you now can communicate instantly. First, Samuel Morse and the telegraph. Okay, and then secondly, Alexander Graham Bell and the telephone. Okay, the telegraph, shortened distances earlier. We have Morse code. That's where obviously Morse code comes from the inventor of the telegraph. It's a series of clicks, short and long, that can be interpreted as messages. And then as time goes on, we get the invention of the telephone, and we all have our telephones now. A little bit different, but same basic idea. And here's a picture of the first telephone. It looks a little bit different. All right, and that's going to be it for today's lecture. Okay, tomorrow we're going to do an activity on the transportation revolution in class. It is expected that you have watched this lecture. Okay, I need you to know the new types of building materials and the new energy sources. I will ask you questions on that tomorrow in class, at the beginning of class, so make sure that you have taken notes and watched the lecture. So that's the end of lesson 1. Thank you very much.